This podcast is brought to you by Purposefully Different Productions and is proudly sponsored by Little Dish, makers of delicious fresh meals for kids that are an absolute lifesaver on busy days. I love these meals because they are different to other kids' meals out there. They include a variety of ingredients, lots of textures, and are made with little taste buds in mind. Before we get started on today's episode, here's a word from our friend Giovanna Fletcher.
At Little Dish, we've spent years perfecting delicious, healthy, fresh meals guaranteed to be eaten by kids. Except when you sprinkle cheese on top instead of letting them do it, or if the little dish is served on the red plate or the yellow plate or the blue plate, or when you talk over them, or when they can't wear their reindeer antlers because it's summer and they're in the loft, or on Mondays or on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and potentially even Sundays. Good luck and Godspeed. Little Dish. Healthy food kids love. Find us in the chill dial.
Hello and welcome back to How to Feed with me, Charlotte Stirling-Reed, the parenting podcast that brings you reassurance, confidence and practical advice on feeding your baby, toddler and your whole family. Today we're diving into a fascinating and really important topic that affects all of us as parents: ultra-processed foods and the impact that they're having on our children's health. With more and more packaged and convenient options filling our supermarket shelves and our kitchen cupboards, it's never been more relevant to ask the question, what exactly are ultra-processed foods? And how do they differ from the foods that we prepare at home? And what does the latest research tell us about the effect of these on growing bodies and growing brains? To help us unpack all of this, I'm joined by two brilliant minds in this field. Dr. Tim Spector, a professor of epidemiology and author of some of the most influential research on diet, and Dr. Federica Amati, a public health nutritionist, researcher and the head nutritionist at Zoe. She also has such a passion for empowering families with lots of nutrition knowledge. Thank you both so much for being here today.
Thanks for having us. It's fun doing one together.
Yeah, exciting.
So first of all, the basics. Tim, what are ultra-processed foods and how should we be defining them, in your opinion?
Well, I think we sort of need to take a step back because we've gone into this world of ultra-processed foods without people really knowing what they are or having a real firm scientific definition. Mm-hmm. And by that definition, over 60% of the foods we eat are ultra-processed. Mm-hmm. But within that group, there's a whole different spectrum of good, bad and ugly that we need to dissect out. So the word ultra just came out, it was a sort of invention of someone as a category of food that it seems so distant from what you'd find in your kitchen, that's made in a factory, that is really added all kinds of things to that food to change its colour, its texture, its flavour, far from the original. Mm-hmm. But I think we just need to realise that a lot of food that we eat is processed. Mm-hmm. You can have an artisan cheese or a yogurt, that's processed because you've actually added something to it. You've added microbes to milk to make yogurt. That's by definition processing. So I think we mustn't get too uptight about that. Mm-hmm. We've got to work out, well, what are the processed foods, which means that things that are foods that have been manipulated in some way are harmful to us. Mm-hmm. Which are the most at risk, which are, mild risk, which are low or zero risk. Mm-hmm. And that's what we've been trying to do at Zoe. Yeah. So we're trying to get people to talk about it. And, around the world, in the US and the UK now, people are talking about ultra-processed foods, but they're unclear what they are. Yes, so we need to sort of really inform people all about processed foods. Some processed foods can be very healthy and others can be extremely unhealthy, and we need to know how to look out for them. And the consumer's stuck in the middle here and is really struggling to work out what they should do. And it's not easy. It is really complicated. The original definition really just focused on additives. Mm-hmm. If you add anything to it, it looks like a chemical, has a chemical name in it, that's ultra-processed. Mm-hmm. But some of them would have a chemical name like ascorbic acid, which sounds worrying, until you realise, well, that's vitamin C. And, people pay good money to add that to their food. So why would that be bad? Yeah. So this is why we've got to take a step back And some of those additives are going to be bad for you. Some are going to be good for you. Some are going to be neutral. And that's one step of it. Then, of course, we've got the other things that food companies are doing to the food to manipulate it, to manipulate us. And I think that's what we need to see processed food through the eyes of a big food company scientist. So what are they trying to do to make us eat more of it? And how do we spot that and warn the public to say, okay, what is it in that food that's making you overeat it, that's making you keep buying it, and even it never makes you hungry. That's the perfect ultra-processed food by the old definitions.
So thinking more about why things are being added to it. So what's the rationale for these ingredients being added? Do you think that's an important concept?
Well, yes and no. Because, some of them are there for preservatives, for example, and some can be good or bad. Like, vitamin C can be a decent preservative, but other ones, benzoates and other things are probably not good. And also the general principle that food companies are trying to create foods that are very high in energy density, but super soft and really dissolve instantly in your body, so that it doesn't take time for that energy and those sweetness and those flavor sensation to get into you. And so you eat more and more of it without filling up, without triggering the normal, natural evolutionary responses we have to eating real food. So they're the extra things we're talking about.
So this is obviously very complicated for consumers to figure this out. It's confusing for us as experts as well. But I believe that you guys are developing a food risk scale. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so as Tim just mentioned, the NOVA classification, which is where the term ultra-processed foods came from, is 15 years old now. And it was really built for epidemiology. It was built for researchers to look at how food landscape has changed. It was not built for consumers to go out and make choices in the supermarket. So what we sort of challenged ourselves with was, okay, let's make something that's actually consumer-centric. So something for people to use in the supermarket to make healthier food choices. What would that look like? The first big thing that we did is to pivot the question from how processed is the food, how industrially manufactured is it, to is this food going to be harmful? You will have seen that some of the recent meta-analyses showed that, as Tim said, some ultra-processed foods can be protective for health, whilst others are clearly negative. So what we wanted to do was okay, let's really cut through this noise. Which are the foods that are definitely going to be harmful, which ones are likely to be moderately harmful, and which actually aren't harmful. So, I always use the example of Weetabix. They are technically a UPF, but no one's going to tell you that they're bad for you, right? So we took the approach of looking at the elements of processing that actually change food to possibly make it harmful for us. So as Tim mentioned, there's certain additives that we know have a negative impact on human health. Then there's others that we're not sure yet. They're sort of on the orange list. We're watching them. They might be. And most recent research has shown that there's a cocktail effect. So in some cases, individual additives by themselves, not harmful, but when you combine them into, say, group of five, actually, yes. Okay. So one of the studies that looked at this specifically found that 5 different additives, only one of which was considered harmful, found in foods together in a group of 5 were really strongly correlated with an increased risk of type 2 diabetes.
Okay.
So we try to look at additives in this in this newer way, not just 1 + 1 + 1, exactly. But actually what are they doing? What's the cocktail effect? And when do we need to worry? And then when do we not need to worry? Please don't worry about ascorbic acid. Please don't worry about inulin added to your food, right? So, and then the other things we look at are hyperpalatability. So how delicious is a food? How much do you want to eat more of it? Once you pop, you just can't stop vibes. And then the last piece is this energy intake rate, which is essentially how quickly can you eat it and how energy dense is the food. When you combine these into the pipeline we've created, you then get these different scores for foods.
Okay.
And what's really positive, I think, for consumers is that actually only about 25% of the foods in our supermarkets are in the high risk category,
That's really
which is
good to
much
know.
different to saying, well, 65% of the food out there is all going to kill you.
Yeah.
So this is really the risk scale. We've tested it. We're in the process of validating it against our amazing data set that we have. So we're able to actually validate whether it's an accurate predictor of harm from these foods, which is great.
Yes, fantastic.
And we're just deploying it to see how it works for people to use like in the app, like what happens. So we're just testing that out.
Okay.
And it's really exciting, isn't it? Because it just, the anxiety that there is around feeding your family, feeding yourself, when there's so much negativity around all food, all processed foods kill you.
Exactly.
You know, to the point where some people are like, well, I only trust the yogurt I make with my own bare hands.
Yeah.
You know, we need to rein that back in and help people feel that food is their friend. Because I fear that a lot of the side effect of the fear-mongering around food is that people now basically a bit scared of food.
Yeah.
And so they're compensating for what they think they're lacking by just taking loads of supplements, lots of pills, powders, which is sort of reducing their mental load because they find the conversation around how to eat healthily too much.
Or else it's the opposite, and they say, well, I can't cut out 65% of my shopping basket. My kids will go crazy. I've got nothing else to eat. Therefore, I'm not going to bother with it.
And I'm not going to listen to more
I'm not going to
advice.
listen to these guys.
Yeah.
They're living in a different planet. You know, it's not for me. So I think that's why we took this, you know, more pragmatic route, but based on science rather than just some dogma of 15 years ago. And I think this approach, it's much easier to worry about a quarter of the food you're eating than 60% of it. And we've got quite a lot of interest from places like the California School Board and other ones that are saying, well, could we use this list to start having, warnings,
Labels,
or at least in institutions like schools, banning them from the menus, so that at least, there's some clarity on this, which you couldn't do. It's really hard to do that in institutions, in hospitals and schools, university, to ban 60 or plus percent of foods.
And I think that word you use, clarity, is so important, because I think that's what, you mentioned the scaremongering and all of the advice online, and it is overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I mean, for a parent who is trying to navigate all of this, trying to make the right decisions, whilst also snowed under, overwhelmed, struggling with parenting, and then going, oh, well, all the choices I've been making for their food is completely wrong. I do think clarity would massively help them to be able to go, exactly like you said, these ones avoid, these ones every now and then, these ones are great. That, how brilliant would that be? And I think at the moment that message just isn't there, because everyone is just talking about UPS as this big overall term, and so people are scared of everything. And obviously there's a huge amount of scaremongering online as well.
And don't forget that also food companies are now coming to us and saying, well, how are you going to score this food? We're thinking of doing this line, but we don't want to have the big red label on us, but we can go in either direction. We want to be seen as a healthy brand. What do we do? And under the old sort of dogma of Nova Score, they couldn't go anywhere. They were all lumped together. Even the ones that were really trying to be good, they just had one tiny ingredient that sent them into the red. Whereas we've now got a much more nuanced way of doing this that means that supermarkets will want to stock products that consumers want. So I think there's a way also of changing
the landscape.
The landscape. And you do that in the supermarkets where people, we want some of our, something on the Zoe score that's more, green and orange and yellow, and not these full of these red ones.
Love
because
it.
the pipeline offers solutions, like the Nova classification, that if there is no solution, you're UPF and that's it. So that's sort of a nice side effect that this work has had. As Tim said, food companies are actually like, okay, we think that we could actually work with this and remove some of these harmful things. Can you share with us? Now, that's not something we're going to engage with directly, working with the industry, but once it's published and we validated it, it'll be a tool that actually, as Tim said, we could potentially change the food environment and help with the companies who do care. Not all of them care. The ones who do want to make a difference and who do want to create healthier products will have a clear pipeline that they can test. So it's a really exciting prospect. And
that's what you need for public health changes as well, isn't it? Rather than relying on the individuals, because some will, of course, but there's going to be lots of people who don't make the changes. So that is definitely better. I mean, I genuinely think this is really exciting.
Yeah.
But will it work for parents? Obviously, a lot of people listening to this podcast are going to be parents.
Yeah.
How can they use it? Is it adaptable? Will it be appropriate?
Yeah, so we're actually doing some work on baby food and formulas now, because it is much more nuanced. And of course, children's dietary needs are different.
Yeah.
Now, our risk scale sits alongside our food score. So it's important to note that the risk scale offers an insight to how the processing has influenced the health impact of that food. But you still need the food score, which is the foundational thing where it tells you about fiber, quality of fats. It tells you about the food matrix. It tells you about how the food itself is healthy or not. So when you combine those two together, you get a very comprehensive view of whether that food is healthy or not.
Yeah.
Of course, children's foods, children's diets and their nutritional needs are different. So we're working to expand that. But the risk scale by itself is already appropriate for the processing side. The food score side is what it needs a bit more nuance. But essentially, if you were to take the risk scale into the supermarket and scan children's biscuits or flapjacks or, dare I say, pouches, it would be helpful in understanding the risk scale. So how has this processing of this food impacted the likely health outcomes? And absolutely, I think it's really important that parents are really aware of this, because you've spoken about this a lot. The availability of highly processed foods for children in the past 10 years has been insane, like quadrupled. So I think it is important that we hope we can put this in parents' hands as well to help them navigate those aisles.
And I feel so sorry because, you go into the dairy section and you see the children's yogurts and they've all got health, what we call health halo. Either
or
cartoons
or both.
So something for the parents, something for the kids, and they're selling rubbish food. But within them, there probably are grades of how good or bad they are. So if we can produce a score that even helps someone trying to sell the healthier ones, they can get to shout louder than the unhealthy ones, then, that's also something that would help move the needle, because it's not all about banning things, and we just want to shift everybody a little and involve more and more people in. That's the way we're going to get change.
And I think parents really are needing this. I mean, I've been working with parents for a long time, but I've also been working with industry for a long time. And I have seen so much that parents just saying, I just want transparency. I just want honesty. I just want to know what I'm buying and whether it's okay. And I think, for years, there's obviously been a lot of misleading marketing, hasn't there? And I do think parents are getting a bit fed up with it, a bit savvy. But like you said, Tim, some of them are going, I don't trust anyone. I can't trust anyone. So you either go all or nothing. You're just going, I'm giving up with all the health advice. I'm just going to eat whatever. Or you're going, I'm going to be making my yogurt at home now and straining it myself and, breaking your back in that way. And there is a middle ground. And I think this kind of solution would help so many parents.
And it's also empowering because we're not getting in this country any help from the government. They are still not admitting that highly processed foods are definitely a risk. Most other countries have actually said that. So we've got this committee that's still sitting on the fence saying we need more research, which is exactly what the food companies are lobbying for. And we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, to make them stand out so differently from the average academic nutritionist, that is quite clear that these foods are bad for us. And so, if the government's not going to do anything, or they're going to be so slow, it's going to be years. We've got to start acting ourselves and give people the tools to make the right choices.
Because actually, when consumers change their purchasing behaviours, the food industry has to respond.
Oh, yeah.
So I think I think there, of course, we need policy change. We've seen with the sugar tax that actually it works. If you just did the same with children's yogurts, that would be cool. Let's do it.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the same time, when people don't buy products, it doesn't work for the supermarkets. It doesn't work for the food industry. So we've seen this a lot with like plant-based proteins. People are buying less meat, and now there's less meat on the shelves. We've seen this also when the gluten-free craze, which is not as healthy, but there was this big gluten-free craze, and there was suddenly an explosion of gluten-free products, right? So consumer demand does influence. And I say this a lot to people, if you want to see change, the money that you spend is a tool for change, because if you don't buy it, they can't sell it to you.
Yeah.
And I would love for people to like do that. Don't buy it.
Yeah.
And tell your friends, and then start a movement and just say, okay, let's have some healthy children's yogurts in those aisles.
Yes.
Let's clear out all the crap.
And do you know what else I do? I now don't take my children to supermarkets.
Yeah, of course.
Because everything is so engineered for them to ask. So if you go and you notice this, it's terrible. All the characters, all the cartoon character foods are at eye level for the children, and they throughout the aisles, right? And so, of course, like last time I can't remember why I took them. I've been doing my online shopping for years.
Yeah.
And I took them. I was like, let's go. And they wanted to come. I was like, great. And I was like, now I remember why I don't do it.
Yes.
They were like, Mummy, look. I was like, it is wild out there.
I actually have a video of my son. He must have been about a year and a half of age, sitting in a trolley going, Mummy, I want the pig one.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, do you know what it is? And he's like, no. He'd seen the character. He'd never had that yogurt. And he didn't even know what it was, and he wanted whatever it was.
They don't care what it is.
Pester power works.
Why don't we start designing stickers that you have yourself, and you could put on the healthy product with the cartoon on it,
Well,
and that will keep your kids happy.
I do sometimes think it would be cool if like lentils, right, had. But similarly, if you think the sort of flip side of that is countries where they've literally just they have big stickers that say like, don't buy this, or they've removed the cartoons. And like actually loads of South American countries have now. Most of South America has adopted this. So your Cocoa Pops do not have the cute little monkey on them. They just don't. And that does help make them less desirable. But in the meantime, I highly recommend doing your shop online and not taking your kids to the supermarket, because you do end up coming home with all sorts of things that you never intended to buy.
And also decanting things out of packets can work really well. And also having, like we say, characters on the more healthful food. Like that's, to me, it's a no-brainer. I remember at university doing a project around that. Why don't we put characters on more healthy products? But, still hasn't been done. But anyway, so can I ask a question, which is a bit tricky, and I think there's a lot of kind of argument, I guess, from healthcare professionals around this, which is, what is the problem with UPS? Is it the additives? Is it the sugar and salt? Is it the manufacturing? And I think what you guys are saying is it's kind of the entirety of the approach. It's not necessarily, you can't label one food as a UPF. It's got to be an amalgamation of all of those together that's causing a problem. But would you agree with that, or do you think that there's something more?
Well, at the epidemiology level, they have studied this, and I mean, the sort of standard government view has been that these foods are bad because they have high amounts of fat and sugar.
Salt and sugar,
predominantly, possibly with salt. But most of the epidemiology studies done recently have looked at the intake of these foods, formerly known as UPFs, we'll call them high-risk processed foods. And they've adjusted for the amount of intakes of in their foods of the fats and the sugars and the salt, and they still see around a 25% increase in most chronic diseases, everything from high blood pressure, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, most cancers, and mental health issues. So I think we can say that it's not, you can't just explain it because they tend to be sugary, fatty foods lacking in some sort of crucial area of nutrition. It's got to be other things involved, and I think what we've discovered really is it's multifactorial. There are additives in there that either have a direct effect or they're affecting your gut microbes. The emulsifiers with these glues, they can glue your gut microbes together, so that then they produce abnormal chemicals in return. You've got the artificial sweeteners in there that do similar things, mess up your metabolism, send the wrong signals to your body and your brain. And the chemicals your gut is producing will go to your brain and can send off signals of inflammation. They can turn on your immune system, for example. And that's I think one of the biggest mechanism going on here is people who have these foods regularly, they are in a way irritating their immune system. And so that's like turned permanently on. And so you never get a rest, and your immune system is working all the time. It can't then do its normal job, and that's why you get these diseases and these other problems, because it thinks you're in a big fight all the time against some mystery infection. But in fact, it's all coming from the food you're eating. I think, to my mind, that's the sort of common mechanisms. The more we discuss this, the more we talk about it, we keep coming back to these common mechanisms of the immune system, the gut microbes, things that interfere with that. And, on top of that, we've got this hyperpalatability, the softness, and the fact that by having this really soft baby food, which we're feeding adults, you're bypassing the normal mechanisms of digestion and feeling of fullness. So I think if you combine the sort of physical side of how the food is created, plus all these chemicals, the lack of fiber, so it's strange that virtually none of these foods have high fiber contents, because that actually makes you less hungry. So you're not going to buy as much of it. So there's a sort of trade-off for these food companies. They don't want to put fiber in there because people won't eat as much. It'll fill them up. But that's the only thing that would be potentially of any good in those foods. So I think that's the way I see it. But I don't think we know the full answer.
But, of course.
Because as Fed was saying, there's so many combinations of these chemicals and these clusters and things that could be doing other stuff to our brain or our guts or other organs we're really not clear on. But I think it's easy to think, if you think of your gut health and you think of your immune health and you think of bypassing the normal fullness signals, that probably, would you agree, Fed? That accounts for most of those, the mechanisms?
Yes. And so this destruction of the food matrix that Tim's talking about makes everything soft. It changes how the nutrients are absorbed. It changes how it, as Tim said, like it goes through the GI tract, how it's broken down. Basically nothing needs to happen. It gets smushed very quickly. So I think exactly those elements together seem to be what's causing the problem. And also if you think of foods as a package, right? These foods, the high-risk foods that we're talking about specifically, so not all UPFs.
Maybe that like 25%.
Yeah, the high-risk foods will deliver on the cocktail effect of additives. They'll deliver on destroyed food matrix, which increases energy intake rate, increases hyperpalatability. But it doesn't deliver on any of the benefits. So there's no good bioactive compounds. So there's nothing to mitigate the inflammatory effects of this cocktail. There's the package itself is a bit crap. So your body has to deal with what we call xenobiotics. So these like unknown chemicals that aren't something we typically consume. And this increased energy intake rate with no benefit, no fiber, no polyphenols to help mitigate the inflammation. So then you end up with this real problem of increased consumption. I think it's still true that overall increased consumption leads to worse health outcomes. So the core message still remains, try to eat as much whole food as you can. Like try and make the majority of your foods whole foods. Even if that just means instead of buying a protein bar for a snack, you've got a handful of almonds. Like it doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to make your own like mega almond balls at home or anything. But just switching to whole foods is the primary message. And then as much as you can, identify the high risk processed foods, get those out the diet. And then for the remainder, for the convenience when needed, go for the processed foods that are likely to be low risk or no risk. If we could do that, I think we'll really start to see a shift in this, frankly, like precipitous rise in just chronic diet related diseases that we're seeing, which are clearly to do with our food environment. So.
And obviously you've talked about a lot of research, which is really interesting. Is there anything specifically linking a lot of what you've been talking about and children? Is there research in that as well?
So there is research looking at children's health outcomes with increased ultra-processed food consumption using the NOVA classification. And I think we've seen an increase in consumption of these foods across the age ranges. I think children around 11 to 16, it's as high as like 65% in the UK. So it's a really high intake.
Which is actually higher than the US.
So really?
I mean, we think no one could be as bad as the United States. Well, UK's doing a pretty good job.
And what do you think, first of all, what is that being made up of? What is it that we're eating?
Well, I was really shocked. I was shocked to see that so children in the UK eat more meat than any other children in the world.
I saw that in that recent report.
Right? And a third of the meat is processed meat.
I saw that.
So
And
it's
I
ham
think there was like a
slices,
really big
salamis,
pepperoni,
there was a big
yeah.
percentage
sausages.
that was meat on pizzas, wasn't it?
And,
as well?
and
It
yes,
was something like, I
the
can't
meat
remember,
on
third.
pizza, yes, was like a massive contributor.
Yes.
So what are they eating? Great question. Like, I think there's so many things we could unpack, but school food is not regulated. We know this. There's guidelines which aren't obligatory. So
And are
basically
very old and
very
apparently being
old.
updated.
Yes, but still won't
I
be
mean,
obligatory.
Most
of
schools are
course.
dreadful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the meals that brought in by the parents are often worse.
Yeah, that's what.
They have higher
Yeah,
rates of processing in them than the actual school, which
That's right.
is a pretty high bar to beat.
Yeah.
But they managed to do it. So, and yet there are schools that do have good food. So we know it's possible if you've got a really good head teacher there that takes an interest in nutrition and says it's probably the most important thing you can do for your kid is to, feed them properly and feed the brain properly.
Yeah, because it's
and
mental
teach
health,
them
isn't it?
an education for the rest of their life with the food they're getting
completely.
at school. So we know that there are some good schools out there, but the vast majority are still dreadful and doing the cheapest, deals they can do with no real guidance from above about it. And they're still told they have to have a dessert.
Yeah, every day.
Every day they have to have. They're not allowed to have fruit.
Yeah.
Under
It's
these
fruit all,
guidelines.
isn't it? It's
Yes.
like, why? But,
Yeah.
and Tim, I love what you talk about. So you've been to Japan a lot, haven't you? And I remember you telling me that. So in Japan, every school has a nutritionist by law, and the children have like a completely minimally processed whole food diet, but it's mandated by the government. Because the thing is, we know that children's diets have a monumental impact, not only on their learning and their health right now, but also on their trajectory for life. So it's like
And their future generations
yes,
as well.
yes.
Yeah.
So it's a no-brainer that if you're trying to have the biggest bang for your buck, you should invest in prevention as early as possible.
Yeah.
But there's no political will to do that at the moment. So, but to be fair, the research looking at UPFs in children is quite terrifying. I think you see these links with like increased mental health problems. You see these links with increased metabolic disease. We now have children as young as 4 with metabolic associated fatty liver disease, which is just wild. I think that's wild. And then you also have, it's clear that the more of these foods children are eating, the worse it is. But again, it's because by the sounds of the most recent data, children are getting a lot of high-risk processed foods as the majority of their processed food
That's
intake.
probably underestimate it because that was using the old classification of a UPF. If we actually divided it, and some of those would be good, so they'd be balancing it out. We actually took our high-risk group, we'd probably find those rates of mental health problems much higher than we are seeing now. And there's a category. And it is all, and things like mental health are so clearly linked to deprivation, where the food is even worse in those areas. And so it should be, and that's costing the country a fortune. You think the lifetime effects on those children who, are suffering anxiety, depression, ADHD. You're seeing increases in autism and all these other, and it just making those problems worse, even if they're already existing. To such an extent that they break down and don't function and never go on to work, which costs the country.
It's really hard, isn't it? Because it all sounds really terrifying, honestly. And I mean, I was involved in the Panorama investigation recently that looked at baby pouches, and obviously, there's a whole other baby snack aisle, and there's so much. I have had so many parents say to me that they found that really hard hearing it, because of course, it's something that parents rely on, and also I think a lot of parents felt like we've taken away something that really is convenient and easy. What is what would be your response to that? Because I think with a lot of parents, we all know how hard parenting can be, how challenging it is. I think it's harder than ever in some ways now because we have so much information. We're bombarded with like how to parent, how to feed, how to get them to sleep. All of this information is overwhelming. So for a lot of parents, I do think, like we said already, they shut off a little bit to it. What advice would you maybe give to those parents who are thinking, that was my saviour, I used that a lot, and now you're saying I shouldn't use it, or I feel guilty for using it? What can we do to help make parents' lives, I guess, a bit easier?
I think on the guilty side, the great news is that if you change your diet, your child's diet, or even if your child's a teen now, it will have a rapid and long-term impact. So it's worth just what's happened has happened. And say, okay, now I know this. Let's move forward. How can I change this? I think the guilt, parental guilt is like universal.
Oh gosh, yeah.
We all have it. I have it.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, how can I know that now I'm going to move forward and like do something differently. On the convenience side, I really strongly believe that the convenience that's being sold to us is a selling point. It's not real. So in the same way that a pouch is convenient, so is a banana. So actually a lot of it is just saying, well, hang on, it doesn't have to be hard. So it's what I was saying earlier. You don't have to like lovingly like bake flapjacks at home. That's amazing if you can actually, but just thinking about time, it doesn't have to be hard. Fresh fruit in a Tupperware is great. Breadsticks and hummus is great. And like, you don't have to make it super fancy or complicated. There are simple things that can be cost effective that are much more nutritious, but we're just being sold the convenience. But more than the convenience, I get really angry when I see things like ideal for learning how to finger feed, ideal for self-feeding. I'm like, shut up. That is not ideal for self-feeding. A banana is like learning. So it's this like pretend
and how that gets through the advertising standards.
Because there aren't any guidelines for it. It's
there's
wild.
no in an area. Yeah, they can say whatever they like.
Yeah. And that's where I get most offended because it's being a parent is such a vulnerable time. You want to do the best for your child. And so when you see a packet that says, this is the ideal food for your 6-month-old. I remember I was working with parents who used to say to me, well, I'm just really worried about choking. So I think this way they're safe. How did we get here?
Exactly
It's
that.
wild.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think just remember it doesn't have to be complicated.
Yeah.
And actually it's going to be worth it in the long term. So just ignore the marketing. They are literally lying to you because they're allowed to.
I did have a lot of parents come to me when I was doing that, saying that actually from the moment their child starts weaning, they almost head to the baby food aisle to get their advice, to get their food, because they feel like it's almost automatic, like that's what needs to be done. That's where you go. Where else would you get food from? Yeah. And I think there's obviously a real problem with, we don't have enough education for parents around weaning. There is
or for anyone,
support.
Right? There's no education for nutrition.
There is no support. And also even like health visitors do a really great job, but they aren't trained in nutrition.
No.
So they're kind of going off of old guidelines or what they did with their families.
Well, it's a good look about peanuts,
Yeah.
All the science tells you should be giving have
allergies.
peanuts as soon as you possibly can to avoid allergy, and you still hear of health professionals saying the opposite. And this is 15-year-old research now that has been adopted by most countries.
Exactly.
And we've still got these outdated weaning regulations and guidelines that make no sense. So,
just to add, the peanuts ground or not whole.
Or peanut butter.
Not whole.
Not for babies,
Ground or butters, exactly. But no, completely. And I think that information doesn't get across. I totally agree. I think it's just so overwhelming for parents. And I do genuinely believe that something like the scale that you're talking about to help parents, like you've mentioned things like hummus and breadsticks. Now, I would have parents come to me saying, is it okay to give those? Are they not UPFs? And I do really strongly feel we need some clarity around what is something that you should avoid, what are okay to include in the diet, because they are adding nutrition, because they are convenient. And I think that is the problem. Parents have got very scared of this now. And
So hummus is a great example. There would be some hummuses under the old scale that would fall into UPF. And that's totally the wrong message, because something like hummus is a fantastic,
great snack,
multi-purpose, snack for everybody.
And it works for kids; they love it.
So that under the new scale, it doesn't matter if it's got some preservative in it or not. The majority of it is good. It's low risk.
So you're taking all of that into account.
That's the message you want to get across. There are plenty of good foods out there, and we shouldn't be fearful.
So is there a world where for a parent there is, you kind of answered this, I think, but there is like a good enough approach? Because I feel like that's the other thing, we've talked about parental guilt. We all almost want to be perfect. Is there a world where there is a good enough approach where, like you said with your food scale, you're avoiding some, you're including others, but you're focusing on that kind of whole food? Is that what we're saying is the good enough approach?
nothing's absolute. Exactly. And if you try and say, I'm going to do everything 100% by the book, you will fail. And then,
You'll
like
be very
most
sad.
things, like diets, etc., you give up. Say, well, it's all, if you do this 80% of the time, that's good enough. If you, every now and again, you can have a high risk processed food. It's a treat, whatever it can be, your favorite ice cream or whatever it is. But educate yourself and know, this is fine to have, a few times a month, but it's not something you should be having every day.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I think that's what we don't want to ban any of these foods, but it should be transparent that this is what you're doing. You're having a rare treat that, if you had it regularly, would be dangerous. But us having the occasional high-risk processed food is going to be fine.
Never going to be a
and
problem.
what we've discovered is if you've got your gut microbiome in good order, you've got really good diversity, a good ratio of good to bad bugs, then you can have these occasional naughty treats without having problems. So if you get your kids in good shape, if they're getting lots of plant diversity, fiber, real foods, then, when they go to other people's houses or birthday parties, they can do their bit without you getting upset about it.
Yes.
Because that just happens occasionally, and their microbes will recover. It's if you're doing it if they're having the equivalent of a children's birthday party every day,
which actually sometimes,
which is what you are getting at school meals, then it's really hard to recover, and you could be doing some
long-term damage.
damage.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, I'm going to ask for your tips on cutting down as like a final couple of questions. But one thing I wanted to touch on was the social economic factors that we've already talked about. Because obviously, as you said, the diets of people who are in lower income brackets do tend to show to be worse. And obviously their health is also worse. Is there any of this where we can kind of take that into account? Because I do feel it is more challenging, but obviously people in lower social economic brackets tend to rely more on UPS, right?
Yeah. Now, this is where we should all be very angry with the government, right? Because if you see children's obesity rates, not globally, but nationally, national childhood obesity rates are actually going down a little bit. But then you look at the socioeconomic brackets and they're skyrocketing in the poorest households and only really decreasing in the higher income households. So we're doing a massive disservice to lower socioeconomic groups and already setting them up for having this huge health gap later. So, and we also know, right, that these households are more likely to live in a food swamp or a food desert. So where there's either no access to healthy food and lots of access to unhealthy foods, or there's just no access to food much in general. So, for those groups, I think we have to try and focus on improving school food regulation and actually provide healthy school meals. That would make a massive difference to a lot of these children, and a sizable one. And we also, again, empower the consumer to demand better from their local supermarket, from their local MP. But again, that's a big onus to put on the individual. So what we hope that with the app, we hope to be able to make it more accessible to more people very soon. And that is in your pocket, a tool that can instantly help you to cut through the marketing, cut through the advertising, and tell you how healthy that food is. What is encouraging is that a lot of the healthier foods are quite cheap. So when we think about frozen peas, frozen fruits, frozen veg, tinned beans and tinned lentils, I mean, they're ready to eat. They're already cooked. So even if you don't have access to lots of cooking facilities, you can actually make healthy foods. But again, you have to make them because there's that onus on time. So generally speaking, I think...
It's not that hard, though. So, I mean, we did, Fed and I did this cookbook, and there's a large section of it about how to use things from your larder that cost, 50p a can. That for a few quid, you've made a really tasty meal for the family. And there are so many different options, things like mixed beans and as you said, frozen veg and frozen berries and things like this that, you don't have to have everything fresh and ready. So if that education got to those people and they were taught this in school or there were, public information programs or these things, then actually we can improve the health of the whole nation, not just, the people who listen to these kind of podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. And you've also got to get the kids eating this food who aren't used to it.
But
and that's
me and you
where
both
I come
know,
in. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That exposure is key.
Exactly.
And I think
building
the earlier
familiarity.
you start, the easier it is. And then don't give up. Just keep exposing. Even if they don't
exactly.
eat it 5, 6, 7, eventually they'll taste it. And I think it is a bit devastating if you make a delicious meal and they're like, ew, yucky.
Yeah.
But actually,
or like beans, so
it's never
unfamiliar.
going to go to waste, because make it for yourself, but expose them.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
continue with the exposure. Because the problem is that if we don't do that, then they're only being exposed to ready meals, packs. That is what they will choose for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Because you choose what's familiar to you. That's a very clever evolutionary
Yeah,
adaptation where we
exactly.
learn in childhood what's safe and we take that with us.
That's why I like in Korea, where they give all the, as soon as they're weaning,
Kimchi.
they give them kimchi.
Yeah.
And they have all these kimchi videos of them giving them spoons of kimchi.
Yeah, exactly.
And they spit it out, but they keep doing it, and eventually they go,
Yeah, exactly, because you like what
okay, you're now
used
a proper, Korean
You're ready
now.
to go. when we started writing your book, this one, my daughter was like under a year old, and essentially I was like, oh God, I really should get them used to sauerkraut. So I have these amazing videos and photos of her about 7 months old, just literally shoveling sauerkraut into her mouth, because I was like, I wonder if she's going to eat that.
Yeah.
It's quite strong. She loved it. But I always say to parents, between 6 and 12 months is the best time. They will try most anything.
They're so much more
They're up for it.
Yeah. So get in early is so easy.
And if your kid's a bit older, still do it.
Up.
Yeah. But and I think also for yourself as a parent, if you can feed yourself well and they're being exposed to that, it will still trickle down.
It will trickle down.
Yeah.
So I love it, honestly, all exactly the same. I do think that parents have a tough job, but I do think something like what you're suggesting will help to add that clarity. And I think a lot of parents will feel that is an absolute game changer for them. So I'm very looking forward to seeing this. But one kind of take-home tip from either of you about reducing UPFs in children's diets would be really handy. One kind of take-home tip, if parents can do anything, what would you say to do from each of you? And then we'll wrap up.
Well, ignore the front of pack labelling.
Yeah.
That's the surest way to not be fooled. And look at the back at the moment, and actually see what the list of ingredients are.
Yeah.
And there's a clear correlation with the amount of ingredients and its likelihood of causing problems for you. So go for the purest form of whatever it is you're after. Is a general rule I would go for. And as well as the more packaging it has, also the more likely it is to be high risk. And fruit and veg doesn't need packaging.
Yeah.
The good stuff doesn't need it. It doesn't need a fancy label. Doesn't need contains extra vitamins label or extra protein or extra anything. It's all there.
Basically, when we think about how we can reduce some of these high-risk processed foods, as I said, it's not about, don't worry about all UPFs. If you're buying, the way for me to look at this is if you're buying like a high fiber bread or if you're buying Weetabix. So actually fiber is often a giveaway of whether it's going to be a high risk or not.
Yeah.
So if the way that you're getting your children to eat more fiber is to give them the brown toast or to give them the Weetabix, great. You can keep doing that.
Yeah.
To try and reduce the high risk ones, kind of like Tim said, they're like brightly coloured, cartoony snack foods, and they just think about what could be the whole food alternative to this. So before you next time you're looking to buy maybe a pouch, or perhaps you're looking at the melty, puffy, sticky things, what else could you buy that's likely to be less harmful and just a whole food? So whether that is making a smoothie at home with frozen ingredients and ingredients that are easy to access, and then actually you can buy refillable pouches. I used to do this. I used to put smoothies in pouches for my kids for air, like when we're flying and stuff. And then the other thing you can do is really think about, could I just, instead of giving them melty sticky puff things, could I just chop some peppers, some carrots, some cucumber, and like give them that? Carrots only when they're a bit older, if they've got enough teeth. But could you switch it to something that's a whole food? Give it a go and keep trying. And I think because so often the highest risk processed foods are snacks, ask yourself, like, does your do you need this right now? Because often we give kids snacks just as an automatic. They're like, well, they're in the pram, here, have a snack. They're in the car, here, have a snack.
Yeah,
Actually,
absolutely.
just wait until they're hungry and then give them a meal or
Yeah.
have the time to give them something more wholesome.
Yeah.
My generation didn't have
didn't
snacks,
get snacks.
and we no snacks
We
in
have
school.
a huge over-reliance
And it's
on
like,
snacks.
Yeah, there's no need.
everyone's going to be hypo if they don't get something to eat. This is complete nonsense. And in Japan, they don't allow snacks, and they're pretty healthy.
So I think,
love
again,
that.
just rethink that. And if you just want your child to have something to chew on or have something to do, because, then if they're teething, you can get a teething toy. Like, this over-reliance on snacks as a distraction is a really odd new thing as well. So maybe just rethink that if that's what's happening.
Completely. And I do think that is happening a lot as well. And I think where parents want that and then they see it in the supermarket. I mean, so many parents have said to me, I just assume that if it's in the supermarket, it's okay. It must be okay for my children. So yeah, I think that is a really good point and I love that. So thank you both so much for coming. You have honestly been fascinating. So much food for thought. Really excited to see your food scale. And yeah, thank you so much for being here and sharing all that with us.
Thank you so much for having us.
A pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of How to Feed. This podcast is brought to you with support from Little Dish, so a huge thank you to them for hosting us in their headquarters as well. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do subscribe, share it with a friend or leave a quick review. It makes a huge difference. And finally, don't forget to stay tuned for my next episode later on. This episode of How to Feed wouldn't have been possible without my sponsors, Little Dish. Their meals are fresh, delicious, and made with ingredients that you would find in your own kitchen, making them a brilliant option for busy days.